You're standing in a quiet gallery in Melbourne, looking at a woman in a black dress and bonnet. Something about her face feels off. A faint discoloration bleeds across her cheek, like a bruise that never healed. You lean in, and the placard tells you almost nothing. It says the painting is by Edgar Degas, painted sometime between 1876 and 1880. What it doesn't tell you is that this woman isn't alone in there. Underneath her, buried in the paint itself, is another face entirely. Critics have known something was wrong since 1922. For nearly a century, that ghost kept surfacing, slowly staining her skin, and nobody could tell you whose face it belonged to. Then, in 2016, a group of researchers loaded this painting into a particle accelerator. And for the first time since Degas himself, someone looked the hidden woman directly in the eye. Here's what makes that stain so strange. It wasn't damage. It wasn't dirt. It was a second painting, rising up through the first one decade at a time. Degas had painted this portrait directly on top of an earlier composition, and he skipped a step almost every artist takes for granted. He never laid down a fresh ground layer to seal off what was underneath. On top of that, he worked in exceptionally thin paint, layers with barely enough pigment to hide anything for long. Oil paint isn't as stable as it looks hanging on a wall. As it ages, its hiding power breaks down. The surface grows more transparent, and whatever sits beneath it starts to bleed through. So the woman buried in this canvas never really disappeared. She'd been waiting under a few thin layers of paint the entire time, slowly working her way back into view. By the 1920s, people could already see her outline creeping across the sitter's face. They just had no way of knowing who she was. The gallery wanted answers, so they tried the tools conservators had trusted for a century. First came standard X-radiography, and it did confirm one thing. Underneath the black dress and bonnet was a young woman shown from the side, facing 3/4 toward the viewer. Beyond that, almost nothing. Then they tried infrared photography, which is normally good at cutting through paint to find what's buried below. Except Degas had painted the woman above in heavy black pigment, and that black swallowed the infrared light whole, blocking any real view of what was underneath. Between the two methods, all they had was a faint outline and a rough seminal. Not a face, not a color, not a name. The only way to see more would mean scraping into a Degas to sample the paint directly, which nobody was willing to risk. So the ghost stayed exactly that. A shape everyone could see and nobody could identify. The breakthrough came from an unlikely partner. The gallery teamed up with scientists at the Australian Synchrotron, a facility that has nothing to do with art on paper. A synchrotron is a particle accelerator. It takes electrons, whips them around a ring at close to the speed of light, and the result is a beam of light 1,000,000 times brighter than the sun. The technique built around that light is called X-ray fluorescence mapping, and it doesn't just look at shapes the way a normal X-ray does. It detects the individual chemical elements sitting inside the paint itself. That mattered because it meant nobody had to touch the canvas, let alone scrape it. Conservators were nervous anyway, Some asked outright if the beam would burn a hole through a priceless painting. So the team spent years testing the method on ordinary paint samples first, checking for any sign of damage at radiation doses thousands of times higher than what the Degas would ever receive. None showed up. Only then did they turn the beam on the actual canvas, and the scan ran for 33 straight hours. What came out of those 33 hours wasn't a picture. 6-megapixel map of every metallic element scattered across the canvas, layer by layer. On its own, each map just looks like noise, a ghostly distribution of atoms with no obvious shape. But every element left behind a clue about the pigment sitting on top of it. Zinc and cobalt traced the exact contour of a face, the same way flesh tone pigments would. Mercury clustered on the lips and cheeks, and mercury in 19th century paint almost always means vermilion, a red used to give skin its color. Iron and manganese overlapped in the hair, pointing straight to umber, a brown earth pigment painters had used for centuries. None of these elements are colors by themselves. They're just metal signatures. So the institutions had to work backward, matching each one to the pigment it most likely came from, then assigning that pigment its color. Stack all of those maps on top of each other in the right order, and a face starts to form. One that hadn't been seen by anyone since Degas put down his brush. For the first time in over a century, somebody was looking directly at her. Co-author Darrell Howard pulled up Degas' catalogue of known works and started comparing faces. It took less than 5 minutes. The likeness was close enough that he was confident almost immediately. The woman buried under the paint appeared to be Emma Dobigny, born Marie Emma Toulier, one of Degas' favourite models, who sat for him around 1869 and 1870 when she was still a teenager. Historians have noted that Degas seemed genuinely fond of her, which might explain why this particular canvas survived at all, instead of being discarded or reused for something else entirely. Not everyone agrees on the identification. Some researchers think it could be someone else, and there's a second mystery the scan couldn't touch. The woman in the black dress and bonnet, the one visible on the surface today, still doesn't have a name. The maps didn't just reveal a face, they revealed Degas changing his mind. One early version of the buried woman had a small pointed ear, almost pixie-like, a quirk Degas was known for around that period. Later maps show that same ear reworked into a more ordinary shape, meaning he went back in and corrected himself mid-painting. He'd also flipped the entire original portrait upside down before starting the new one directly on top of it. And the two images use noticeably different palettes. The buried woman in cooler, lighter tones, the surface woman in something warmer and darker, painted roughly 7 years apart. That contrast in palette is exactly what let the elements separate so cleanly on the scan, turning 2 paintings pressed into one canvas back into 2. Here's what's strange when you sit with all of this. The face was never actually hidden. It had been rising to the surface for 100 years, staining the paint above it a little more with every decade, waiting in plain sight the entire time. Nobody could read it until a beam of light 1,000,000 times brighter than the sun finally caught up with what the canvas had already been showing us. This same technique once found a face buried under a Van Gogh, and researchers expect it won't be the last. So next time you stand in front of an old painting and something about it looks slightly wrong, remember it might not be damage at all. It might be someone else trying to get out.